Okay, next, Cubism started in 1907. And Cubism is an avant-garde art movement where subjects were analyzed, broken up, and reassembled in an abstract form. So we'll take a look at this. But the gist of it is the subjects are looked at from one angle, and then the artist kind of like imagines what's on the other side, and kind of like on the canvas, they kind of, when they paint, they flay the subject open so that it kind of like turns out into like, it comes out as a cube or like geometric shapes, because that's what the artist is imagining the other side of the subject that we can't see from our perspective. So the subjects were depicted from multiple angles, and the first movement with partial abstraction as its main idea. So this is abstraction for the sake of abstraction. So before Cubism, we didn't see abstraction for the sake of abstraction. It was mostly like they just wanted to, stylize it, or their focus was in lighting or the brushwork. But now with Cubism, abstraction is the main idea. And this was the first movement to do so. The important artists are Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque. Okay, this is a piece by Pablo Picasso. Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. I think it means the ladies of Avignon. But as I said on the previous slide, it kind of the subjects were analyzed and then broken up and then reassembled in abstract form, and that's exactly what is happening here. They are looked at from one perspective, but you can see multiple things going on. You can't even tell what's going on, really. Okay, so this is Pablo Picasso. All right, next is Georges Braque. This piece is called Violin and Candlestick. Can you see the violin here? I think it's right here. This is like the body of the violin, and this is the neck. And then where's the candlestick? I think it's this. And I think this, oh no, wait, I think this is like a wine glass or something. So this is the candlestick, and this is the violin. And it's really, really broken up. From Braque's perspective, he was imagining how the object would also look from behind, and he was just deconstructing the object in his head. And he came up with something like this, which is just wild, because I don't know how anyone would see shapes like this on what I'm assuming is a dining table. But this is what Cubism is. It's highly abstracted. It's not full abstraction because it's still referring to real life objects and real life people. So it's not full abstraction. It's partial abstraction. It's still referencing, and it's grounded on objects and people that exist in reality. Okay, let's move on. All right, Surrealism started in 1917. And Surrealism is also a cultural movement, and it was developed in Europe in the aftermath of World War I. And World War I was a very bloody event in history. A lot of people died, more than World War II, and it was really rough. World War II, we start having scientific and engineering advancements that kind of made soldiers on the battlefield, they made them, to like in better conditions. Like the condition in World War II, the battle conditions in World War II were much better than World War I. World War I, there were a lot of fallout from it. I mean, the conditions were much, much worse in World War One, and people died after the war due to infections and trauma and injuries, things like that. And so the surrealist artists, they lived through World War One, and they depicted the unnerving and illogical scenes. What they did was, they turned their trauma into art. And so if you look at surrealism, it doesn't make any sense. It has detachment from reality, but that's the whole point. World War One was such a surreal experience to a lot of these artists. They turned it into a whole movement. And it used techniques to explore psychological themes, techniques like frottage, meaning they used the technique of rubbing an object onto a surface with paint, kind of like getting an imprint of an object to create like brush strokes or brush marks on their canvases. Max Ernst used a whole lot of this. Okay, and then initially associated with political causes such as communism and anarchism. So a lot of surrealists were also communists, and it was looked down upon from a lot of people. And there was, people would say that Salvador Dali was a communist, and he wasn't really liked. And yeah, it's true, he was communist. He made some good art, though. Okay, important artists are Salvador Dali. He's Spanish. Okay, Rene Magritte, Max Ernst, and Frida Kahlo. Frida Kahlo is Mexican. She wasn't a part of the larger surrealist movement because she didn't witness World War One. She was in Mexico, but for Frida Kahlo, her pieces are a lot more personal. Okay, so here's a piece by Max Ernst, The Elephant Celebes. It's a really bizarre painting. I guess this is like the backside of an elephant, and there's like what I'm thinking is a bull and a person without a face, and I don't know. So like it's like all kinds of weird stuff going on here. I guess it's up to your interpretation. Yeah, it's just really bizarre. Okay, here's a piece by Rene Magritte, The Son of Man. Rene Magritte was one of the more famous surrealist painters, and he made a whole bunch of these portraits of people with their face concealed by an object. So he also made this one where like a similar painting where it's a man and an umbrella. Well, this one is a man and a pear. This is a pear, right? Yeah, and these pieces are meant to be psychological. I mean, I'm guessing it has to do with identity as well because the face is covering, and the human face is a large part of their identity. And if he's covering his face with a pear, this piece probably has to do with something to do with identity. All right, and then let's look at abstract expressionism, which started in 1940. So abstract expressionism started right around the time World War II started. It's actually a post-World War II art movement that developed in New York City in the 1940s. Okay, so its roots started in like during World War II, but then it wasn't until after World War II that it got really big. And it got really big because many artists in Europe, they escaped World War II, they ran away from their country, and then came to USA during World War II. I mean, that's how the US has so many immigrants, right? Where the US is an immigrant country. Every single one of us is an immigrant, minus the Native Americans, right? So during World War II, all these artists, they ran away, they left Europe, and they came to New York. And they started working out of New York, and now New York was in the spotlight of the art world. New York was New York was the birthplace of abstract expressionism, and it's the first true American art movement. And this is important because World War II signifies the end of an era for Europe. For many, many centuries, Europe was at the spotlight of human achievement and human history. Now, with all those people fleeing Europe and coming to the US, the spotlight moved to the US, and the US turned into a, well, historically speaking, the first true superpower of the world. We have a very strong economy, and we have very influential politics that kind of decides what's going on in the rest of the world. And so our power grew quite a bit, and one of the exports of the US starting around that time was art. And so abstract expressionism was the first American art movement. Well, not the first American art movement, but the first movement to gain traction, because there were some other movements that came out from the US. They just weren't that big. Movements like regionalism have always existed. It just didn't gain any traction, and it was a lot bigger in Europe. Okay, so its predecessor is Surrealism, and it's almost fully abstract. So if you look at some abstract expressionist paintings, it doesn't even reflect reality. It's just something completely different that we're not used to seeing. And it has an emphasis on process as well. Process meaning the method in which the artist used to get to that certain image. So we're going to look at process art later on, but process becomes a huge deal, and the process itself creates the art. Sometimes the artist doesn't really get involved in the creation of art. The artist just puts it in motion, and it's the process that creates the art. So we'll take a look at all that later. Important artists are Jackson Pollock, Mark Rothko, Willem de Kooning, and Barnett Newman. So you're going to notice that Mark Rothko and Willem de Kooning, they're from other countries, but they all immigrated to the USA. And Jackson Pollock is actually, I think, from Spain or something. I think also artists like Pablo Picasso, they fled Europe and also came to the US. So even Picasso was working out of the US. Okay, so here's a piece by Mark Rothko, untitled, Black on Gray. What do you think of when you see something like this? I mean, it's just black and it's gray. Like, many people are going to look at this painting and they're going to be like, my 5-year-old kid can paint this. Well, they haven't, so they can't say stuff like that. Pieces like this are up for interpretation. The artist has his own idea, but the artist also wants the viewer to complete the experience. A piece of art is not complete without a viewer, right? So when I look at this, I see loneliness. Okay, it's maybe I'm referencing real life things, such as like maybe the surface of the moon, or just an empty prairie, grasslands at night, and there's nothing there. It's just the dark, black night sky and the ground below it. Or maybe it's the emptiness of your mind. Maybe it symbolizes death, the afterlife. When you die, maybe you see something like this. Okay, so it's up to you to decide what this is. Here's a piece by Cy Twombly. This piece is untitled, but it's referencing New York City, and this is probably my favorite abstract expressionist piece ever, because using just these circular scribbles, Cy Twombly has managed to capture the essence of New York City. This is what New York City feels like. This is exactly like New York City. It's just complete chaos. Okay, I don't know if any of you have been to New York City or left the island or been to another state, but if you go to New York City, which you probably should, New York City is a great place to be at. You can learn a lot from just spending a few days there. Lots of museums, and there's just so much variety, so much diversity. Like, it's a true melting pot. Hawaii is not a melting pot. Hawaii is a melting pot if the Middle East or Europe doesn't exist in your world. Hawaii has a lot of Polynesians and East Asians and some white people, and that's it. If you go to New York City, it's a true melting pot of Asians, Middle Eastern people, Native Americans, Hispanics, Latinos, just everyone. And it's just utter chaos. There is so much going on. And this drawing, I feel like, captures the essence of New York City so well. It's just, I think it's amazing that something like this was drawn in times when people were like so opposed to it. I mean, even now, when people look at something like this, someone who's not versed in the arts would be totally appalled, and they would, say something like, I can do that, right? Well, they haven't, right? So, it's easy to judge a piece after looking, but then it's difficult to come up with something like when no one's done it before, because there's nothing to go by. There's nothing to reference. But abstract expressionism, it pushed the boundaries of art so much, and something like this eventually became an acceptable thing.